Hello everybody, and welcome back again to the Reggae Appreciation Society. Jamaican music has been huge in Africa since the 1960s, especially after Millie Small's massive tour of that continent in 1964. But it was in the 1980s that its own reggae scene really crystallized into a big force with a constellation of homegrown superstars like Alpha Blondy, Lucky Dube, and Majek Fashek. These cats interpreted that music with their own indigenous flavor and hard-hitting messages about the continent's unique existential challenges like military dictatorship, neo-colonialism, and the oppression of their brethren in South Africa. That generation of artists undoubtedly put African reggae on the global map, but were by no means the first to do it in that scene. The first indigenous African reggae musician is widely believed to be South African maestro Carlos JJ, whose impact was massive, albeit limited to his own country. But if you were talking about breakout success on a continental and even international scale, then you must tip your hat to Nigerian musician Sonny Okosun, aka Ozidi, a close pal and label mate of Peter Tosh, who caught the world's attention with a smash hit single and album Fire in Soweto.
Fire in Soweto, burning all my people. There was fire in Angola.
The song in particular was a masterclass in instrumentation and conscious messaging that captured in stark lyrics the motherland state of crisis and dragged it into the consciousness of listeners around the globe and introduced Ozidi as Africa's first breakout reggae icon. Now, most interestingly, the man wasn't even what you would call a reggae artist in the first place, as he before then played a hybrid of African funk and Afrobeat, pioneered by his one-time collaborator Fela Kuti since he formed his first band in 1970. The main themes of his music were always traditional stories and concepts around African spirituality, as had been for his first songs and albums. But in 1976, a terrible atrocity that shook the whole world would change his direction completely. On June 16, 1976, the township of Soweto in Johannesburg, South Africa, was rocked heavily by massive protests led by thousands of students from various schools around the city against a new policy put in place by the apartheid regime. Those protesters were met with brutal force that resulted in loss of casualties that shocked the entire globe to its core and sparked a political backlash against the regime, as well as subcultural response from artists and musicians for years to come. And among the artists around the world radicalized by the tragedy, Sonny Okosun was one of them, and from then on embraced more radical subject matters in his music, focusing entirely on Africa and its then mounting problems of poverty, war, and neo-colonial oppression. Naturally, the Soweto uprising would feed into his next project, that was 1977's Papa's Land, which got production input from Eddie Grant. He had just been signed by EMI Records and developed a close working partnership with Grant, who gradually began to influence him to infuse more reggae into his music, which up until then had been purely an African sound. Inspired by all the mess going on in South Africa and the entire continent, he began to write the songs for his next album, and in early 1978, EMI Records would fly him to London to start rubbing minds with Eddie Grant. And a few weeks later, they went into the legendary Abbey Road Studios to record the very first song that was titled Fire in Soweto.
Fire in Soweto, burning all my people. There was fire in Angola.
An exquisitely crafted lamentation about the bloodshed and chaos across the motherland. This song wasn't released as a single, but was so hot that it fired the whole LP of the same name to instant commercial and critical success. As far as sales go, it was dynamite and sold 500,000 copies in record time, going gold in a matter of weeks. It soon made inroads to Europe and Brazil. Needless to say, it was banned in South Africa for obvious reasons. But it didn't matter. If anything, it made it more popular around the world, gaining massive airplay, especially in Africa, where it became like the de facto anthem against oppression. It was indeed among the first anti-apartheid songs to go mainstream and became an underground smash in South Africa itself. The song was so influential that it was covered by UK punk rock band The Clash, with their own version that they named Where You Gonna Go Soweto. Its impact also got to the Caribbean, as it was covered by a Jamaican artist named Bob Scott and the Ambassadors.
Fire in Jamaica, burning all the people.
With the title Freedom Is Our Goal. The song made Sonny Okosun among the leading voices in the musical arm of the anti-apartheid movement. In fact, it became so big that he would tour the next year with Toots and the Maytals and Jimmy Cliff, and would be invited to attend the first anniversary of the independence of Zimbabwe in 1981 by the country's then president, Robert Mugabe. And 4 years later, in 1985, he reached the peak of his fame in that regard and had his status cemented as the only African artist invited to be part of the Artists United Against Apartheid for the iconic Sun City album, along with the likes of Miles Davis, Bruce Springsteen, and Bono. By that time, he had all but gone back to his Afro-funk and pop roots and enjoyed amazing success in that space. But by then, the floodgates of African reggae were well and truly open, with a new generation of young guns already making waves in their own countries. The very first and most popular of these was Alpha Blondy, who had released his first album, Jah Glory, in 1981, and the enormously popular Coco de Rock, powered by instrumentals from the Wailers Band. Another was Lucky Dube, who released his debut album, Rasta Never Dies, in 1984. By the end of that decade, there were numerous indigenous reggae artists like Tikenja Fakoli, the Mandators, and Majek Fashek, showing the hot stuff that African reggae acts were made of. Their subsequent success would eventually totally eclipse Okosun's heroics from the previous decade. Okosun became a gospel artist in the 1990s and continued on that path until he passed away in 2008 from cancer. But as far as the history books are concerned, whenever the question is asked as to who the very first reggae star from Africa was, the answer will always be the phenomenal Sonny Okosun. So there you have it. Thank you for watching this video today. Please leave a like, subscribe, and until next time, Jah bless.